Hi everybody, thank you all for being here. My name is Zainab Mohammed, Z-A-Y-N-A-B, Mohammed, M-O-H-A-M-E-D. I'm the Community Advocacy Manager for the Council on American Islamic Relations. And I'm standing here with community leaders as well as activists who have been on the ground this year and for the last several years, demanding for justice and accountability for all Black lives, as well as they've also been here all year demanding for the Minnesota state legislators to pass police accountability, which they've failed to do this year. It's important to point out that Philando Castillo of Minnesota and the best friend of Representative John Thompson, Walter Scott of South Carolina, and Sandra Bland of Texas have all been murdered by being pulled over by police officers. These are just a few of the high-profile cases you will hear about, but there are numerous others. Black and brown communities have been a target by police officers when they stop them to target them by searching their cars in order to find reasons to criminalize them. And this happens to Black people 3 times more than other communities, especially other communities that are white. So it's important to point out that we stand here in solidarity with Representative John Thompson, who was a target by police department the same weekend that a few years ago, his own best friend was murdered by the Falcon Heights Police Department, Philando Castillo. There has not been justice or accountability in that case. We fought all year to make sure pretextual stops do not happen. And so we stand here as a community. I will be the MC for this press conference today. Thank you all for being here. Our first speaker is going to be a civil rights attorney, an activist, and the former NAACP President, Nikema Levy-Armstrong.
Thank you, Zainab. Good afternoon. I'm Nikema Levy-Armstrong, civil rights attorney, activist, founder of the Racial Justice Network, former president of the Minneapolis NAACP. I am here to stand in solidarity with community leaders who are standing in solidarity with John Thompson. I have been dismayed to see the attacks on one of our few Black male legislators in the state of Minnesota. We know that our legislature is overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly complacent when it comes to addressing issues of police violence and police accountability. These individuals do not have the moral grounding or authority to try to attack a Black man who is claiming that he was pulled over as a result of racial profiling. And to see the media run with that story simply based upon the contents of the traffic stop is ridiculous. For many years, we have called out the issue of racial profiling amongst Minnesota law enforcement agencies. There was even a bill that was proposed several years ago that was killed before it was actually passed, and it focused on trying to eliminate incidences of racial profiling in the state of Minnesota. When we think about the fact that we are still in the midst of a pandemic, and we are hearing concerns from community members about violence that is taking place, about people feeling unsafe, how does a St. Paul police officer have the time and energy to hone in on someone riding in their car, minding their own business because they don't have a front license plate? There was no real reason to pull over John Thompson and to go down the path that this has taken. It is racial profiling when you know that you are being pulled over because of the color of your skin. And this has happened time and time and time again. And when you look at the St. Paul Police Department to see Chief Todd Axtell, who knows that there is systemic racism that is a part of the St. Paul Police Department, the fact that they are literally the deadliest police force in the state of Minnesota and one of the deadliest police forces around the nation, to scoff at the fact that racial profiling played a role is absolutely ridiculous. We know that a white motorist traveling through St. Paul that time of night without a license plate would not have been pulled over. We also know that the situation has escalated far beyond what it needed to. This has gone into the realm of targeting and harassment of a Black elected official simply because he has been one of the most prominent, outspoken voices against police violence and police brutality. Democrats and Republicans alike have shunned him, have been negative towards him, have tried to exclude him, and tried to get him to tone down his rhetoric about the need for approaching the issue of police violence with a sense of urgency. As Zainab just said, this is not a man who is just talking to be talking. He is talking from experience, having lost Philando Castile in 2016 because an officer could not distinguish between a man minding his own business and driving his car and an actual criminal or bank robber. We look at what just happened to Dante Wright in April of 2021, where again, a young man minding his own business, riding in a car, attracted the attention of the Brooklyn Center Police Department in the midst of a pandemic, where Dante Wright told his mom that he was pulled over for having an air freshener dangling on his mirror. And when we showed up and we questioned the Brooklyn Center Police Department about this, the chief at the time talked about the fact that Dante Wright had expired tabs on the back of his car, and that was a reason. And he also acknowledged the fact that the air freshener dangling on his mirror was a reason. So here we have a problem in the state of Minnesota where driving while black is a liability. We are continually pulled over. We are continually harassed. And when we raise our voices, when we show up at the legislature, like we did time and time again over the last year, demanding police accountability, not a single police accountability is passed. And then we have Republican legislators saying that they don't want to pass any bills which could be considered anti-police. Well, what about the status quo being anti-black? And the fact that we are not comfortable driving around the state of Minnesota. We are not safe. Just yesterday, my own 21-year-old daughter, driving close to North Minneapolis and holding her phone in her hand simply to look at her GPS, was pulled over by state troopers. And I'm thinking, we're in the midst of the things happening in this community, how do you have time to pull over a young black woman for holding her phone? And then when you approach her and she tells you why she had her phone, you treat her aggressively and abrasively, and you don't believe her. So she shows the state troopers her phone and the fact that she was simply on her GPS. And while they're running her license and doing all of that, and she was in dialogue with one of the state troopers, he apologized for the conduct of his partner in being harsh and aggressive towards my daughter. My daughter called me in the midst of that traffic stop, shaken up and concerned by what was happening to her, and she told me that she tried to engage in a cordial conversation with the troopers so that the situation did not escalate. Now, this is my daughter, minding her own damn business, not a criminal, not somebody out there shooting, not somebody out there engaged in crime. This is a young woman engaged in spoken word and trying to get there to meet her colleagues, and yet the state troopers are spending their energy racially profiling her and pulling her over. And guess what? After all that, they let her off with a warning. So it shows that law enforcement officers are back to business as usual, and this is on Democrats, and it is on Republicans, and it is on those who sit idly by and engage in the harassment of a black man who is standing up for justice and trying to hold our elected officials accountable for doing right by African Americans and other people of color when it comes to these encounters with police. So yes, we stand in solidarity with John Thompson. We ask that the media exercise restraint and use common sense when it comes to defining racial profiling. Someone shouldn't have to walk up and say, I pulled you over because you were black, in order for us to draw inferences and to know that that's the reason they were pulled over in the first place. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jaylani Hussein, the Executive Director of the Council on American-Islamic Relations.
I'm here today to stand with John Thompson. And as Nakima mentioned, John has been a long-time activist, someone who deeply cares about his community, someone who stood after killing of Philando Castile, began his effort to be the change that he wanted to see in his community, and became an elected official, and is the only voice, the strongest voice against police misconduct in the state of Minnesota. And we believe, and I personally believe, that I fear for not only John, but also his family. Listen. Because this is the beginning of what we believe will be happening to John and other leaders in our community who have shared their clear demands that we hold police accountable in this state and in this country. We believe that there are white supremacist police officers in every single department in this state. This year, we failed to even pass legislation that would ban police officers who are part of white supremacy organizations to serve their community. The Republican Senate refused, and the Democrats failed to negotiate that bill in, which today is still outstanding. What is also outstanding is after a request, a letter that we have sent to the 3 police agencies, associations in this state, asking them to publicly condemn white supremacy. Those 3 agencies have failed to respond and condemn white supremacy among their ranks and in society. We have seen reports across this nation that have come forward that have identified white supremacists that are part and parcel of police departments all over this country. And in Minneapolis and in other places, black and brown officers have sued their departments because of white supremacists who serve and lead departments across the state. That is why we are not only concerned, but we are concerned for the life and the safety of John Thompson. How is it that the one department that he is calling out, the one department that he is on the Public Safety Committee to hold them accountable, is the one that is pulling him in the middle of the night on a regular traffic stop? This was not a regular traffic stop. Many of us have experienced those traffic stops. I personally experienced those traffic stops. And when I was stopped in Columbia Heights, I wasn't even told why I was stopped. Asked only where I'm going. Where I'm going. That is the type of stops that happen across the state when a black and a brown person is driving in their community. Not only am I stopped for driving while black, but I'm also stopped for flying as a Muslim in this country. And this exists all over this United States. In addition to that, right now, many Minnesotans, black Minnesotans, understand what it means when someone says, "Do not come to our neighborhood in the middle of the afternoon." And Sheriff Bob Fletcher of Ramsey County stated that on his live Facebook Live, talking about what he told, or what was told to criminals, that they should get out of town before the sundown because they're going to be probably lynched in the middle of the night. We believe there is white supremacy police officers working right now in the state of Minnesota. And any legislator who has the testicular fortitude to stand up against injustice will be targeted by these agencies and their white supremacist police officers. And that is why we stand with John Thompson. We also stand today to call out this state and say, shameful to the state of Minnesota, the state that killed the state that killed George Floyd has failed to pass meaningful police accountability. This is the reality that we live in today. And after this session ended, this state did not stop killing. It killed 2 human beings, Linnell Frazier and Torres in Olivia, Ricardo Torres in Olivia. This is happening every single day. We have been asking for these people to pass. John has been asking for the state to pass meaningful legislations to save lives. That has not happened. And therefore, we're asking our beloved community in this moment. The police are not only targeting those who are calling them out, but they are also failing to serve our community. The 3 young, beautiful girls who died in North Minneapolis have yet to find their killers. That is a reality of the police department in Minneapolis, who is failing black and brown communities all over this state and in the city of Minneapolis. And that is why today we not only stand with John Thompson, but we call out the white supremacy that exists in police departments. And we know that you do exist, and we are coming for you because this community will demand justice by any means necessary.
Michelle Gross, President of Communities United Against Police Brutality.
Oh, excuse me. Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Gross, and I'm President of Communities United Against Police Brutality. You know, the Republicans in the legislature, some of the Democrats in the legislature, and even the media would have us be outraged because John Thompson has some issue with his driver's license or something like that. Frankly, I don't care. There are people that sit in this legislature who have engaged in intoxicated driving. There are people in this legislature who have sexually harassed women. There are people in this legislature who have engaged in other wrongful conduct, and we don't see all of these hues and cries about these people. There is a certain area in the House chambers that women in the chambers refer to as rapey row. Some of you in the media probably know this. The point is this: there are people who engage in all kinds of conduct, and I'm supposed to care about somebody having some glitch with their driver's license or something? No. The issue is this: John Thompson makes racist whites uncomfortable with being racist. And that is a completely appropriate, necessary, and desirable characteristic in a legislator. He is calling for more resources for his community. He is calling for an end to police violence. These are the real reasons why they are attacking him, the real reasons why the St. Paul police pulled him over, and the real reason why there's all of this fuss going on between the legislature, the media, and so forth. Nobody cares about somebody's driver's license. Who cares? The issue is he makes racist white people uncomfortable being racists, and that's a good thing, and he should be lauded for that. And I stand here to support him and to demand an end to these attacks on him, and to thank him for the role he has played in this legislature since he's been elected. That's right. We need more people like John Thompson in the legislature, lots more. And those racist whites that are uncomfortable with him, feel free to leave. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. We need lots more John Thompsons and a lot less of these white supremacists that sit in this House and Senate chamber and prevent real things from happening for the real community. Thank you.
Kashir Garaway, Family Supporting Families.
I would first like to address Todd Axtell, who said that John Thompson owes the St. Paul police an apology. But in fact, the St. Paul police owes the families that the St. Paul police have murdered in cold blood. And the officers are still out there on the streets. The officers are still living in their homes and going home to their families after our families have been destroyed. That's right. We deserve an apology. That's right. From the St. Paul Police Department and all of the rest of these departments that are involved in these murders. John Thompson stands with our families. He stands with Valerie Castile, where her son was shot in the car in cold blood on Facebook Live. John Thompson stands with the rest of our families that are out here hurting and suffering in the community in which you guys serve, Todd Axtell. And to Maya Godfrey, you put that article about my brother in that newspaper, and enough is enough. You guys will not continue to attack our black men. You will not do it. You will not do it. You will not do it. These are our black men that deserve to live in the community. They deserve to have a place. The accusations that they said about John Thompson were not true. Before they murdered the father to my child, 7 days before that, they pulled him over, the St. Paul police, and checked his car, didn't find anything, took him to jail. After they took him to jail, they were punching on him, hitting on him. 7 days later, he ended up dead in a dumpster. We know that racially profiling is real. We don't have to beg and plead and try to prove it to you guys because we live it every day. We live this stuff. We live racially profiling. We live all that you guys are doing to hurt us in the communities. And John Thompson is standing up for that. They don't want a black man in those seats that are standing up. They want a controlled black man that is whitewashed, that will do whatever they say. And because he's not that man, they're attacking his character, and they're using the littlest thing that they can use to attack this man and go after him and go after his family. Well, our families and our community is standing up and saying, if you guys can back the blue, which is a profession, it's not a cult. It's supposed to be a human profession. If you can back that, we're going to back actual human beings that you're dehumanizing. You guys want to dehumanize black men before you kill them in cold blood. All of our lives is on the line because you live this racist system. We know that it is racism infiltrated into the police departments, this entire system. And I am forced to believe that even the media is involved in this racism. Because if you can write an untrue article about somebody without getting offense, you're a part of the racism, and I'm calling your ass out. You're a part of the pain that's been inflicted on our families. You put these false articles in there about our loved ones, and you continue to do it. And you know that it's causing harm. You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. And as a black woman, I'm standing up to you. Listen. Because you will not continue to do it to our men. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jonathan McLennan, Minnesota Justice Coalition.
Hello, my name is Jonathan McClellan. I'm president of the Minnesota Justice Coalition. We are part of a collective of organizations that work with the families and community to draft and advance legislation and other policy initiatives at the Capitol in St. Paul and in Washington, D.C. Representative John Thompson has made headlines after he was pulled over on July 4th for driving without a front license plate. We are disappointed in political gamesmanship being played over the traffic stop of Representative John Thompson. We have been told that he was pulled over for driving without a front license plate, but was given a ticket for a suspended driver's license, with no body cam footage released on what happened prior to that encounter that may reveal the state of mind of the officer, which highlights the issue and need for reform around pretextual stops. We are not falling for the banana in the tailpipe or the okey doke or the political smokescreen to divert attention away from what's really happening. As Representative Thompson said, we're still getting driving while black tickets here in the state. As a matter of fact, in St. Paul. So let's just call it out for what it is, end quote. Public data tracked by the city shows that 43% of traffic stops in St. Paul last year were black drivers. The black population in the city overall is 16%, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. This past special session, Representative Cedric Frazier championed a piece of legislation that would end pretextual stops, but it was defeated by the GOP in the Senate. We are all aware of the problems police have had with minor traffic violations or pretextual stops in our community. We can look at Dante Wright, Philando Castile, and many other situations as an example of a black person being pulled over for a minor traffic violation and the situation ends tragically. Representative Thompson said it best. The desire to be treated with respect and be able to drive away from this interaction safely was why he informed the officer he was a state representative during their conversation. He was able to drive away from this interaction while other black Minnesotans in very similar situations have not. Representative Thompson has unfortunately become a lightning rod because of his position and fight for police accountability, even as people in law enforcement, both political parties and other people involved in special interest groups have attempted to smear his reputation and take the focus away from the major issues and their lack of work in the area of police reform. The people involved in this special interest groups have been pushing this narrative that the black community experiences on a daily basis. The formula is simple. Go after the black man's reputation, try to discredit him in the community, and have the same negative effect as representative in the 1915 movie, The Birth of a Nation. Law enforcement for decades has been pushing legislation to chip away at our liberties, our rights, and our communities by pushing policies that absolve them of their crimes, weaken and remove the checks of accountability, transparency, and justice, with access to unlimited resources and unfettered access to our elected leaders. Our nation is on the precipice of change. However, Congress has failed to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and Minnesota has failed to pass any substantive police accountability legislation, despite Minnesota being ground zero. We have a problem. Some of our elected leaders do not see the humanity in black and brown skin. Our own lieutenant governor said that the state of Minnesota is not safe for black people. Yet the state of Minnesota has failed time and time again to pass any substantive police reform while attacking people who are trying to do the work. W.E.B. Du Bois said, "A system cannot fail if it was never meant to protect." We stand here in solidarity with our brother, Representative John Thompson. It is time that we stop living in the past and be the future we know we can be. Thank you.
Trayhorn Cruz with Black Lives Matter, Minnesota.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I plan to be very brief. John Thompson represents one of the poorest districts in the state of Minnesota. John Thompson represents a district where children suffer from lead poisoning, where they have the oldest housing stock in the state of Minnesota. A lot of people in his district face the same issues that he faces and that we face as black men in the state of Minnesota. Minnesota is one of the best places to live if you're white, but one of the worst places to live if you're black. We have an executive order that we would like Joe Biden to sign immediately, and we think it also could be modified for at the state level, and that would be $3,000 a month for COVID relief to the American descendants of chattel slavery. It also includes driver's license procurement, because everybody has the right to travel, and it also addresses child support settlements that need to happen right away. It also addresses qualified immunity. It also establishes the Office of African American Affairs. So we'd like to see President Joe Biden sign this executive order into law immediately, like he has signed over 100 and close to 130 other executive orders that did not help black people who helped him get into office. Without the voters in Detroit, Joe Biden would be black voters in Detroit, Joe Biden wouldn't be president. Without black voters in Atlanta or Georgia, Joe Biden wouldn't be president. Without Philadelphia, the black voters in Philadelphia, Joe Biden wouldn't be president. So we want some relief from our government right now, and we're here to stand in we're here to stand in solidarity with Representative John Thompson. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Mohammed Ibrahim, who's the Deputy Director with CARE Minnesota.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Ibrahim. I'm the Deputy Director of CARE Minnesota. It's Mohamed, last name Ibrahim. And not only do I stand in solidarity with John Thompson, Representative John Thompson, we need more John Thompsons like you all heard today. And we're talking about the same John Thompson that's been receiving death threats to his home, threatening himself, threatening his family, yet we have no coverage on that. But while we're busy here berating a black man, we never want to talk about how the MMPOA and the MSA, the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, as well as the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, we sent them letters in April and in June to condemn white supremacy. And we have yet to hear from them. Yet here they are acting like they have some sort of high moral value, right? But they cannot speak up on condemning white supremacists in their police force and within their ranks. And again, we have not seen any coverage on the 6 Minnesota legislators that were here in front of Governor Walz's home at the governor's mansion, threatening him and threatening his family. We have yet all of a sudden want to turn a blind eye to that, but we want to focus on the only black legislator that was overtly outspoken for black lives, that continued to fight for black lives, that continued to fight and say, no, we do not want more policing in our neighborhoods, but we want investment in our neighborhoods. And yet, here we are having this conversation about John Thompson. I want to say that John Thompson's life matters, John Thompson's work matters, and Black lives will continue to matter. And we need to continue to stop berating a Black legislator, and he's being targeted and he's being attacked for his outspokenness, and like Michelle said, for making people feel uncomfortable about their racism, right? Especially in this time. So we need more people to actually stand in solidarity with John Thompson, and we will continue to fight this fight to make sure that we end these pretextual stops that have implicit bias written all over them because they stop people and asking them their whereabouts and not ticketing them. That happened to my wife as well. And we continue to have this conversation because when my wife moved here, the first thing she looked up was sundown towns in the state of Minnesota, right? And yet we have chiefs and people and high officials making jokes about sundown countries and sundown towns, acting like they don't have no idea what it is, saying that it's from a Western movie. We know exactly what you're alluding to. We know exactly what you're applying for, and we know that is not all right. So it is up to us to continue to stand with John Thompson and continue to stand for the right, because history will remember who were on the right side and who demanded for police accountability and demanded for Black lives mattering in the states, and history will also remember those who remained silent in this moment. Thank you.
Questions?
It's the sheriff,
The Police and Peace Officers Association.
yeah, the sheriff, the police, and the chiefs association. There's three. The association.
Yeah, the police special interest organizations, MPPOA, Chiefs of Police Association, Sheriff's Association.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we've been talking about. We've been talking about an agency that we've asked simply to do what is expected of them, to condemn white supremacy, and they have refused. And they have targeted John Thompson from Hugo now, and they will continue. And that's why we're concerned not only for his for this incident, but also his life, because we don't know who from these white supremacist groups will be targeted. We know that John Thompson has received threat from the Proud Boys and among others, as Mohammed just mentioned, and so that's why we are really concerned about this attack. We're also concerned about the double standards that we have 6 Republican legislators who threatened our democracy here while there was an insurrection happening in the Capitol and cheered while they heard that people went inside the Capitol, right? There are 6 Republican legislators who should have never been serving in this state after they threatened the democracy, they threatened other legislators, and not only that, they also threatened the life of the children of the governor in his mansion. And no one talked about these legislators, no one followed up with them. We also got threatened. We went to protest in front of Senator Gazelka's business in Baxter, and we were met by a white supremacist militia who made threats online that they were going to shoot us up, and then we did see armed men circling around us as we protested. This is a state that we have a white supremacist issue. This is also the state that the only bombing of a mosque happened in the United States because white supremacist groups targeted Muslims. That's why we are concerned, and it's the police departments who are failing to show leadership in this moment and to stand up and condemn white supremacy, which now we will work together with our coalition to come up with a plan on how we move forward, and we'll announce that hopefully next week.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Jaylani said, we know that Representative John Thompson has been viciously attacked since the demonstration that we held in Hugo. And just to remind people, that demonstration was held outside of the home of Bob Crow because of his rhetoric, his divisiveness, and his rubber stamping of police abuse against Black people. How he demonized George Floyd and many other people who have been killed by police, using his authority as the head of the Minneapolis Police Federation. And so this is a man who was allowed to travel from Hugo to Minneapolis to help terrorize residents there, and where there was no accountability. So we took the battle back to his doorstep in a peaceful protest. And since that time, because of John Thompson's outspokenness, he has been targeted, he has been attacked, he has been excluded, he has been maligned, and it is completely unacceptable. We have watched legislative hearings where we have seen legislators make snide remarks about John Thompson in chambers. So it needs to end. It is bullying, it is harassment, it is unacceptable. That's something that John Thompson is able to deal with directly. But if I were him, I wouldn't give my address out either. I know that what we face in terms of doxing, we constantly have to deal with people who watch Alpha News and some of these other mainstream media organizations who are constantly trying to say they're going to come to our houses. And we know that these people are not above breaking into buildings such as what happened at the U.S. Capitol, right? Trying to kidnap elected officials and essentially getting away with it. And some of these same elected officials in this building, in the Senate building, some of these same police officers who are part of the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association need to keep that same energy that they have for John Thompson and apply it towards white supremacists who tried to destroy the U.S. Capitol. They need to keep that same energy for a leader, a vicious white supremacist leader that they followed, Donald Trump, with his whole slew of abuses against the American public and the things that he called out. Yet these people still line up in support of a man like Donald Trump. But they have the nerve to try to tear down and demonize John Thompson, a man who is actually standing up for freedom, justice, and equality. There is a serious double standard that is going on, and we really hate to see the media playing into this and contributing to the demonization of John Thompson.
I just wanted to remind you all that on the one of the final days of the legislative session, that Eric Lucero, I'm talking about Representative Lucero now, actually said in the chambers as he was attacking John Thompson, actually said that there is no such thing as white privilege. He actually said that multiple times. And basically, we've got a problem with racism in this state. We've got a problem with people who do not understand that white supremacy exists in this state and that it's a problem and that it deprives people of their rights. And so to make themselves feel more comfortable living in that space, they go after the one person who is calling them out. And I will never forget hearing Eric Lucero on that last day of the session look at John Thompson and say, there is no such thing as white privilege. I will never forget that. Thank you.
Can you please elaborate on that about John Thompson and his family fearing for their life and the threats that they have been basically receiving?
Absolutely. So John Thompson has been receiving quite a number of threats since the demonstration that happened in Hugo, online. And he's received phone calls from people who are threatening to come to his home and attack his family. So he has every reason to conceal his home address. And many of us who are standing here have been faced with similar threats. We know that, again, these white supremacists are not above using firearms against black protesters, as we saw happen in November of 2015, when we had the occupation outside the 4th Precinct after Jamar Clark was killed. White supremacists showed up and they shot 5 black men. And only one of them was held accountable under the law, and Mike Freeman barely wanted to hold him accountable. We also had white supremacists show up outside the governor's mansion after Philando Castile was killed. Our security team followed them out, saw that they had weapons, and we notified the authorities who were present at the scene. In the aftermath of George Floyd being killed, we had white supremacists flooding into the Twin Cities. They were leaving notes on people's cars if they had Black Lives Matter signs in their windows near their homes. They also chased people and shot at people and shot people, particularly black people. There was no accountability and no media coverage for this abuse at the hands of white supremacists. For some reason, as black people, when we are calling out for justice, when we are saying that our lives are being threatened, when we are saying that we do not feel safe, it is not taken seriously. There needs to be a security detail for John Thompson, rather than this gaslighting and abuse that he has been experiencing.
Thank you.